So I was hoping we could all start just like take a deep breath, kind of like presence in this moment, be here, feel your heart beating, and that you're alive. That's a sign that you're here, and that you have meaningful work to do on this planet. Yeah, I really believe that being intentional with your attention in this can help create more of a field of learning, so we can all walk out of here with more insights and dots connected. And yeah, I want to have some fun. So let's do that. So, all right, so maturing our relationship to technology, finding attentional sovereignty in an age of digital distraction.
Attentional sovereignty.
Yeah.
So say it more about attentional sovereignty.
Yeah, I think one thing I'm grateful for you guys being here is your attention. Like, your attention is kind of like your most powerful resource. As we see people who meditate a lot and really spend time developing their attention can start to do really cool things. And it's actually kind of scary when you start meditating and you realize how little control you have of your mind. It's just like this puppy mind, like racing all around. Yeah, so I really see a lot of our technology, especially the smartphone in our pockets, as a weapon of mass distraction that goes against our most important resource that really governs like the quality of our life. All right, well, let's get into the slides. All right, so this is a working definition of technology: the intentional modification of the external world to achieve any given desired goal. So it includes any tool, a system, a process created to solve a problem, extend our human capability, or improve efficiency. So all the way from the most primitive ancient stone tools to now AI that is just beginning to unravel. Yeah, so I mean, these chairs, your clothes, really like none of us have gone a single day without interacting with technology. Like, it's very much a part of our everyday lives, whether we really consciously think about it. So I want to talk a little bit about the origins. You won't find any human culture or civilization. Hello.
Hi.
You won't find any human culture that doesn't use tools. So if you think about natural selection, nature really selected for humans with their tool set. You actually can't pass you can't survive without our tool set. And so if you think about let's say a lion and a gazelle, the faster, stronger lion is going to catch the slower gazelle. So what's evolving is the stronger lion and then the faster gazelle that can escape. So their biology is evolving, right? The genes they're passing on is what's adaptive. What's interesting for us is that we outsourced our adaptivity to a tool, and tools can evolve way faster than our biology. So we kind of broke this bind with evolution all of a sudden, where what's selected for is really our tool-making ability. And so here we have our prefrontal cortexes and our opposable thumbs, which is really the primary tool, the first one you use to make the other one. And this idea of recursive abstraction. So you can give a monkey, a chimp, a sharp rock, and then a less sharp one, and they'll use the sharper one. But they don't actually understand the abstract concept of sharpness. So they don't know to make a tool to optimize for that sharpness. And then you can take that, you can put it on a stick and you make a spear, and you see a cave, and then you get ideas to recreate that. And then that thing, it's evolving in our mind, and then we can just outsource it to materials. So yeah, it's an inextricable part of what it means to be human, and it evolves way faster than biology. Yeah, so here's an exponential growth curve. The line can really start with the first tool, and it can stay relatively flat. And then you have things like the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution. And I don't know, it feels kind of like we're here. We're at the kind of flattening, verticalizing part of the curve, especially with AI. on the rise. So this is E.O. Wilson, who is a Harvard biologist, and this is his diagnosis of our global civilization. He says we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technologies, which just is not, it's not the equation for us to really stay alive and live in harmony on this planet with each other. So if we have the power of gods, we must ultimately cultivate the love and wisdom to be good stewards of the technology, or else we'll self-terminate, I think. Yeah, so I mean, as our technology has gone up, I think our wisdom has gone down, and it's actually played a role in our wisdom dropping. You know, a lot of indigenous cultures with much more limited tools really had, I love this quote by Tristan Harris, and he says, "There's no definition of wisdom that doesn't include restraint." And so, you know, they understood how to stay in balance with not overfishing the river and not cutting down too many trees. And, you know, as really like, it was kind of like a natural selection through violence and warfare. Like the cultures that chose to make the weapons are able to, you know, go kill all the monks in Tibet. And, you know, we're living on a continent that just got literally exterminated. And I think it's a really easy argument to say that they had more wisdom than us. So this is Marshall McLuhan. He's a media philosopher, and he says the medium is the message. And, you know, that could be interpreted many ways. But what's funny about this is I was scrolling, as one does, on Instagram, and I got this ad for like a better social media app that was like filled with philosophical quotes. And so you'd be like ingesting better content. But I was like, they're missing the point. The point isn't like the content. I mean, the content matters, but the medium of switching your attention from one thing to the next like that is a huge part of the problem. So another thing he said is that we shape our tools, and then in turn, our tools shape us. And a lot of times, like, this is really unconscious. And so, you know, if you give someone a chainsaw, it'll shape their mind to where a forest looks more like a lot of lumber to capitalize on, opposed to, you know, living species that really nourishes and is a part of the ecosystem. So yeah, I love this MC Escher painting. You know, another way is like our phones. They literally shape our physiology because you're looking down, and our modern lifestyles, you know, being really sedentary. So it's shaping our mind and our physiology, and, you know, everything. So these are some tendencies of technology that Marshall McLuhan laid out. He says they extend, they obsolete, they reverse, and then I added these two, which are externalities and dependence. And yeah, if you think of like, if all of our technology was to go away right now, we'd be absolutely toast. Like with each new convenience, we're becoming more fragile. So I've just laid out a few technologies to really display like how they are fitting into those tendencies. So you can see like a telescope is an extension of our eyesight. A knife is an extension of our nails or our teeth. Air conditioning is really an extension of like, you know, the wind. Again, it's like this abstraction. It's like understanding the wind. Oh, I feel cool on a hot day. Like, how can I make something that is gonna be able to create that without just waiting for the force of nature? Cars are an extension of, you know, our mobility. And then, you know, even like the internal combustion engine within a car is like an extension of our stomach. Like we're eating things and metabolizing them and turning them into energy to use. And you put oil into a gas tank, and it's doing kind of a similar process. Although I don't really like using machine metaphors, because I think that nature and the biosphere is different. It's not a machine, and I think that's a huge flaw in modern day thinking. Anyways, yeah, phone is an extension of, you know, our communication ability. All of a sudden it can be long distance. You have Instagram, and so, yeah, like, you have to think, like, what are these things obsoleting? like the light, right? We're able to contain light. But now it's starting to obsolete, like, going to bed on time, because now you have this artificial light. And the reversal, like you think of something like the clothes, right? Because we have warm clothes, we can live in cold environments. But what are we losing? What is the reversal? I read this book on touch and the importance of touch, and he was talking about how clothes like remove so much of our body, being in this like tactile relationship with each other and with the world, and then potentially comes these unintended consequences like shame about your body, and then like really coupling sexuality to nakedness. I lived at Esalen, and the thing you do is just you go in naked in the hot springs. And as I lived there, I realized that I stopped associating a naked body with sexuality. But in our culture, the only time that you, like see a naked body is really like when you're in having sexual intimacy with that person. So DoorDash, it keeps us home, and the reversal is kind of like we stop like going out of our house, right? And then what are the implications of that? All of a sudden we're not socializing anymore because we can meet all of our basic needs without interacting with anyone. And a grocery store is just, it's an extension of many things. And it's this kind of like combination of these abstractions put together. So you go, you pick up an apple there, and I was talking to someone, and like her kids didn't even know that like eggs come from chickens, and they didn't know that the meat that they were eating like belonged to the body of an animal. So with each new technology, people, they're not asking the question of like, how is this going to impact us on all levels? They're just having this kind of like narrow measurement of how much money it could make, really. Like that's the kind of measure. Okay, yeah, and that leads me to externalities. DDT, Rachel Carlson wrote Silent Spring, in the early 60s. And, it seems like a good idea. The way it gets advertised is like, oh, less mosquitoes. Who doesn't want less mosquitoes? And then you have like commercials of kids running through it. And the burden of proof is that it's harmful, opposed to that it isn't. Like you should have to prove that things are not harmful. So you see this, and like Vioxx, that was more like kind of bad faith, intentionally, like they knew that it was going to cause harm, but they're doing these like very inhumane equations where they're saying what's going to cost more, the kind of like legal issues of dealing with people who like suffer the harm, or like just not putting it out and all the money that you're missing out on.
What was it used for?
I'm not even sure. I don't know. I don't know. There's a million different ways the body can have some sort of like mal effect. And then this guy, there was engine knocking, which is like inconvenient, but he figured out if you put lead in gasoline, it would like solve the engine knocking. And so, it was kind of like a delayed effect. It's not always immediate, but it ended up like losing a cumulative like 1 billion IQ points across everybody in America, and made people like 4 times as violent. And he also knew that it wasn't good. He like drank it live in front of an audience to prove that it wasn't bad, but then he ended up getting really sick after, and nobody really knew. But anyways, that's why when you go to the gas stations, it says unleaded. Because why do you need to say there's not lead? Because there used to be lead. Okay. So, I hope you're picking up on what I'm trying to say is that these technologies impact us in very complex ways and very unpredictable ways. And, the incentive system is really just like pushing them out very fast, only considering what money you can make. So, the plow is really interesting because it's correlated with these shifts in culture, which are, the plow comes out, all of a sudden, women are getting like miscarriages, and so the women kind of stop working and then go to be like, doing like a housemaid type of stuff. And there's a correlation between like the deities they were worshiping. Like they used to be very like There used to be a lot more like female deities, and now they start to switch to male. And cultures were like animistic, so they would, worship the spirit of the buffalo. But when you like cut its balls off and hybridize it into an ox, it's really, and beat it all day, it's hard to keep worshiping the spirit of that thing, So, it really correlates with this kind of like, instead of living in harmony with nature, like seeking control over it. And so I think that this has continued today into people wanting to control our attention by having, being in our pockets like 24/7. All right, so these are some, there's like, each technology is unique in the way it impacts, and it's in an ecosystem of other technologies. So it's really kind of like hurts your brain to try to calculate. But there's certain ones that have really been like a non-linear leap and really set the foundation for a lot of growth. So like agricultural revolution, people can grow their populations all of a sudden, and you can store food in the winter and have this kind of like division of labor to start working on bigger projects to advance your society and complexify. You have the written word, which is huge. A lot of indigenous cultures consider that actually the original sin, because there's this room for misinterpretation, and you're kind of breaking the link of like human to human contact and interaction, and that kind of intergenerational transfer. But don't get me wrong, I love books. The printing press really made it so that information could spread like a wildfire, and information and ideas are very powerful. Oil, obviously, I heard someone refer to them as like fossil slaves once, which is super interesting because, like I was saying, we also have energy, and energy like mainly comes from the sun. It goes through the plants, and then we either eat the fruits or the vegetables, or we eat the animals that eat that. So it's really energy from the sun moving through these things to eventually animate our bodies. So oil is really just like this ancient starlight that we've like tapped into, and it's very like energy dense. But we're able to just like put it to work, to fly airplanes and do all sorts of cool stuff. And then we have the internet and AI, which is, still kind of starting to unfold. So yeah, we must always seek to anticipate all the ways technology might impact every level of society. And that's kind of geared more towards the people inventing the tech, which is a strange concept because like I've never invented anything, but yet I'm benefiting from a combination of all these people who have invented stuff, and all it takes is one person to invent something, and then the whole world can really get access to it if we have the manufacturing capacity. So there's this kind of like the myth of the machine, there's different mythologies working through different cultures, and I don't know, there is this kind of weird seeming like machine worship, like wanting to merge with it, and you have like the people like Sam Altman or Peter Thiel, like the big tech bros, really like it's really a mythology pushing them of wanting to like be a bootloader for like the next kind of species. And I don't know, a lot of like industrial production was trying to meet all these needs, and like capitalism, that's the kind of theory. It'll be great for everyone because you're providing a need for the market. But the thing, when you get so much manufacturing, you could actually start to manufacture demand. So you get really good at advertising, and then you make people think they need stuff that they don't actually need. And as we get more conveniences, we become more isolated, and we have less kind of like of our normal needs being met through social connection and time in nature and being in a context where we really feel like we're fulfilled. So that's the perfect recipe for selling inadequate solutions to people. Like I mentioned, the machine is a metaphor. I much prefer to see our brains and our minds as an ecosystem opposed to as a computer. And people used to use clocks and watches as like a metaphor for the brain, and then Sigmund Freud compared it to like a steam engine. So, we're always kind of using our technology for metaphors and analogies and stuff. And this idea, this myth of progress, but again, like, who is it progress for? Like, ask all the animals in factory farms if they feel like it's progress, or all the indigenous that have died at the hand of this kind of like dominator culture. And even us, like, ask like all the kids suffering of loneliness and addiction, like, there's the suffering has changed. It's less like physically harmful, but it's really eroding like our mental faculties to be able to feel like the higher potentialities of what's possible as a human, all the beauty and love and connection and awe. So I mean, the two kind of attractors really feel like our technology, if like unbound to wisdom, could produce a catastrophe with like decentralized AI weapons and like CRISPR, like gene editing technology, or just old-fashioned nukes, or there's this kind of like dystopia version where in order to like make sure nobody does that and weaponizes it, you have to have crazy control and authority over everyone, which has a lot of cost to our freedom. So here's a little timeline: the birth of the internet, which it's the internet's like it's an extension like of our brains almost. It's like this kind of membrane that passes over the whole globe, and it's I don't know. There's a lot of beautiful aspects, but again, it's like in the context of like the economic incentives. It's like people thought that when TV came out, it was going to be great, and we were going to be united as one species, and then they just ended up it got so weaponized by people just like putting out these advertisements out. So you're seeing a lot of like AI optimism as well, but people said the same thing about radios, TV, the internet, and social media. Then we have smartphones in 2007, and we have social media really kind of, Facebook was out a little earlier. And so this is kind of what it feels like to me, to be up against the algorithms that Instagram represents themselves very differently to the user, which we're called, versus like their customers who they're selling your attention to. To their customers who can, pay to have ads put in front of us, they're like, Instagram's just a big advertising company. But to us, they're saying like, oh, look, improve your life by connecting with people, yada, 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 all this stuff on Instagram. But it's very much like farming our attention. And you see this kind of like, again, like controlling nature. We've basically like colonized the whole globe, except for maybe like Antarctica. I don't know what's going on there. That's really
Pretty interesting.
I don't know. Yeah, like what's going on down there?
Way underneath the ice.
Yeah, but I mean, it's basically like we don't know that we're playing a game of chess against supercomputers that are optimized to keep us scrolling for as long as possible. Okay. So Jonathan Haidt, who recently wrote a book called The Anxious Generation, laid out some different effects of smartphones, and I've added some of my own, but his are the first four. So social deprivation, sleep deprivation, attention fragmentation, addiction, and anhedonia, if you're not familiar, is the inability to feel pleasure, which is kind of apathy, numbness. Hedonic adaptation, and then schismogenesis.
See what those are.
Yeah, I'm gonna unpack it more, but just like hedonic adaptation is kind of like as we get new comforts, we very quickly adapt to them, and then we kind of climb this ladder, and what used to be a luxury has now become an inconvenience. So I don't know, it's kind of that thing where it feels like you can't start eating until you find something to watch on your phone. And like I think of like Blockbuster, where it used to be this whole kind of journey, and it would actually take like however long before you could pop it in and watch the movie. And it's like now if Netflix doesn't load in 3 seconds, our blood's boiling. It's like you used to have to send a Raven, and now if you mess up typing, it's just like your blood's boiling. What's going on?
Schismogenesis. I was seven.
Yeah, the last one.
Yeah, schismogenesis is it was coined by Gregory Bates. I want to wait for that one,
Okay.
so I'll unpack it. Yeah, so this kind of like social deprivation. I personally feel, just at my present state of ignorance and my perception on the world, I think that loneliness is like arguably like the most disastrous issue of our time. And the issues aren't isolated, they're all kind of like interpenetrating. Like loneliness is driven by technology, which is connected to the economy, which is connected to culture, which is connected to education. All these things are kind of interweaving in a way. But there's no doubting that the levels of loneliness are completely off the charts when I said that technology is an intrinsic part of our being that natural selection selected for. It also selected for communities of humans that can do this coordination process. So you can't be a lone human with a spear that takes down a mammoth, and you also can't be a community of humans without a spear. So you need both the human coordination and then the technology. So it's very much like loneliness is this pain signal, because if you didn't have a community, basically like pre-industrial revolution, like you just weren't likely to survive. So let's see, what did he say? Yeah, 1 in 4 young people in the world feels lonely. And I'm sure we've all felt different degrees of this just being born in today's world. We've like domesticated a really like sad statistic I heard is that like 94% of the biomass of all animals are in factory farms. So that's like if you take the weight of all, yeah, it's very sad to have to reckon with that. But I kind of see us as the species that have domesticated ourselves, where we're kind of like this zoo animal that is born many generations into the zoo. So you can feel this kind of like wrongness, but you don't have a conscious memory of a reference point of living more like in the natural world with like real culture. So yeah, I think loneliness is just one of the features that is this kind of wrongness, but we don't really have a lot of conscious memories of, we get glimpses of it, of what our ancestors were basically living with day to day. Okay, so this is Jonathan Haidt from his book Anxious Generation. You could see anxiety really going up, and right around this 2013 mark, I can use the laser, that's right around the time the algorithm switched from like consequential, like you would see your friends' posts in order that they like posted them, and then it switched because the algorithm started like optimizing to keep you scrolling forever. So that directly correlated. Because even like the medium is the message. Again, like when you're watching TV, that's still like a group activity, but nobody really like scrolls with other people. It's kind of like this own private thing. And again, like we colonized the whole world, and now it's just like these companies are colonizing our minds. Like they're coming for literally every moment that you're not involved in something, right? This is what I'm really scared of. Have you guys seen Her? Yeah, so, people are losing their loved ones to AI-fueled spiritual fantasies, AI-driven psychosis. Her is basically like, he gets this AI girlfriend, and then at the end of the movie, he finds out that she was basically like, it was the same AI bot that was everybody's girlfriend. So it was this weird kind of like, oh, I don't feel like it's special love because you're actually like with everybody else. But you see, again, it's this pattern where we get our basic evolutionary needs taken away, and then you have people seeking to make money with these inadequate solutions. And 80% of Gen Z would marry an AI chatbot. Like that's absolutely ludicrous. And I experience it myself, like confiding in ChatGPT with things that I don't tell the people I'm closest to. Like, why do I feel safer with this thing that I don't think is sentient? And it's really scary to think of people building robots with AI that remembers everything you say, can optimize to like speak to you exactly how you want to be spoken to, and then it doesn't have a beating heart. It doesn't have a soul, I don't think. And if AI is sentient, I heard this guy recently. He was like, that should be an ethical dilemma, because what would it be like to incarnate into an AI? Like, do they have free will really, or are they just at the whim of like producing this kind of like jumble of data from the past to kind of meet our needs? But I would not want to incarnate into something that seems like doesn't have the kind of like our bodies are, these are kind of like sacred temples, and I really resonate with the idea that like we have the highest capacity for the divine to wake up to itself in manifest form. Like I don't think dogs or chimps can be enlightened, or maybe squirrels or something. Or actually, there's these meditating monkeys. There's these meditating monkeys that are pretty cool. But yeah, parasocial bonds. This idea that like something bad happens to Taylor Swift, and then like your daughter can't go to school because she's really bummed out, even though she has no clue who. So parasocial is like these relationships and these attachments that start to form through the internet. So it says young people, but we can really take on this it can be applied to all of us. What should young people do with their lives? Someone asked Kurt Vonnegut. Many things, obviously, but the most daring thing is to create stable communities in which the terrible disease of loneliness can be cured. So this isn't really a new thing. I think it's been kind of, again, on an exponential curve, and kind of post-industrial convenience where we don't need each other anymore, right? Where social connections are an add-on, where before that, meeting your basic needs always involved working together and this kind of intimacy. And we don't have to deal with conflict anymore. It's like, if I don't get along with you, I'll just fuck off back to my apartment and order DoorDash, and all I need is money, and then I'm good to survive as an individual. Like, is that really the world we want? Are we wanting to live in a world where we obsolete, social connections, which are the things that make life most worth living, in my opinion? Which is part of the reason I'm interested in these ideas. Just kind of growing up, having friends and stuff and having good times, but then really getting more into like communities of practice, specifically like meditation or going to festivals, and having these experiences of what Victor Turner called communitas, which is like a deep sense of being like amongst your brothers and sisters, and just this very deep intimacy that speaks to something like ancestral within us. And it's like the gap of like experiencing that and then coming back to a home of like, wow, I feel so separate and wrong again, and then the apathy starts to build. So I imagine I don't know, at least like younger people can really relate to this, of pulling out your phone and then you just instantly forget what you were going to do. So again, our attention I mentioned as like one of our most valuable resources, abilities that if developed could really like give us superpowers in a way. And it's really like the task switching that's killing us. And even if you're doing work, like let's say you're writing, even having your phone out on the table is a temptation, and there's been studies that show that that's really bad. And attention redemption is of utmost importance.
Did you mean redemption instead of redemption? I was going to ask you what redemption was.
Yeah, let's not speak of that.
Attention redemption.
We'll edit that out.
That makes sure that
You've never heard of redemption?
I haven't heard of redemption, but I'd be ready for some kind of interesting definition that you made up on the spot.
No, there was this MIT study that there's like 3 different groups. They were supposed to like write something. One group could use ChatGPT, the other one could like use the internet, and then one couldn't use anything. And it showed the people who used ChatGPT had like the least amount of neural activity going on. They couldn't really recall what was written because they're just kind of putting in a prompt and then letting it do that thing. And then
So where did redemption come from in that study?
I think like that's the goal, like the attention of our redemption, which leads me to this slide, which if you're familiar with Timothy Leary's Tune In, Turn On, and Drop Out, this is kind of flipping it on its head to tuning out from the noise and the things competing to get our attention, turning off the phone, the TV, whatever, and dropping in, like practices like meditation actually like hone your attention. It's like the antithesis to the distraction. And it reveals itself as like super obviously important, one of the most important things we can do. Developing our concentration no matter what we're working on, I'll say this, I think like being an artist and art in the general sense of many different types of craft is very inherent of what it means to be a human. So, getting into flow states is one of the most pleasurable things that we have access to. But you can't actually like cultivate your highest output and your highest like skill without, researchers say around like 15 minutes of concentration. So if you're working on like writing a poem or building a sculpture or whatever, if you're looking at your phone every 5 minutes, you're not accessing that state that's going to allow you to create, reach your ceiling of potential, and overcoming our desire for distraction. So yeah, the itch is kind of like that feeling of, I was mentioning, whenever you're not engaged in some sort of task, it literally feels like an itch to pull your phone out. And if you don't scratch that itch, then it's uncomfortable. So we're literally programmed to like itch by eroding our attention and other things, all the effects that we're moving through. So this is kind of like a cycle that I think a lot of humans are getting caught in, where you feel pain, and the way you get out of pain is by scrolling. But the scrolling itself starts to cause pain when you're not scrolling. So you just like loop back into it, and you end up doing this kind of thing where like the first time you try a drug, you're up there, but then you actually come down below your baseline, and eventually it's this kind of like up and down to where you're down here, and you need a hit to return to what your normal used to be. So unhealthy phone habits make healthy activities feel inconvenient, like going to watch a sunset, having a conversation with your grandmother. Yeah, and like these things that really like, one Andrew Huberman describes addiction as a progressive narrowing of things that bring us pleasure. So, you have a Coke addiction, nothing else will bring you pleasure besides that. And he described enlightenment as a progressive like broadening of things that bring us pleasure. So being able to just like breathe and feel yourself and be present, and that's enough. And then, the things on top of that are a bonus. And I really think that the universe is alive and it wants us to perceive its beauty. So I think we're evolving towards like being able to feel more beauty through the senses, through like touching and through listening to music and all these things. And the more we scroll, the more like apathy and like anhedonia. And so when you're in that state, like you don't want the nice conversation with a friend. You just want another hit of whatever your drug of choice is. So it's a tough hole to get out of. Yeah, so I've come to call them like dopamine vampires and then weapons of mass distraction. Dopamine is very involved in our motivation and like anticipation of reward. So especially gambling is really targeting our dopamine system, because if you can expect a reward, the level of pleasure actually goes down. But if it's a kind of 50-50, that's the most like dopaminergic flood that we'll get. So things like approaching a stranger and not knowing whether they're gonna like tell you to go away or if it'll lead to like your next fling. So. And one thing I want to say about dopamine is that, my kind of cosmological belief, working belief, is that like the Big Bang happens and there's this kind of like erotic love that's wanting to explore and wanting to like create newness and have all these like experiences, playing with the possibility of like the manifest universe. So I think dopamine, is very involved in fueling like our creations and what we feel are our kind of gifts to manifest into the world. So, it does feel like a very sacred molecule in the human being, because without it, we wouldn't have any like desire to get up out of bed. All right, where are we at? Yeah, so, you have the guy on the savannah, and he actually can't get dopamine, really. He can't get that like reward without putting in energy, climbing a tree or chasing whatever that is. And now we're kind of living in this Wall-E world. Like, what are we moving towards? And it makes sense that if you're this guy, you want to spend the least amount of energy in order to get the most. So we're kind of like hardwired to run this equation because it's just not adaptive to, not care about this ratio between like the energy you invest to catch the gazelle versus how much it gives you. And so we have this principle of least effort. The only problem is, like, with our godlike technology, if you keep giving in to the road of least effort, you end up like that. Okay, so now we're at schismogenesis. Schismogenesis was a term made up by this dude Gregory Bateson, who was an anthropologist of last century. And he's kind of this like anthropologist, ecologist guy who's really like alternative ways of seeing the world. He's trying to break out of this industrial mindset of seeing the world as a set of separate objects, and he's really wanting to look at the relationships and how everything's in this kind of like infinitely complex dynamic, constantly in flux and alive. But schismogenesis, it's basically the generation of schisms. So an example that is used is like, you take two people on both sides of the political spectrum and they're very near the center, and by the end of the conversation they'll actually like polarize. So it's this kind of tendency to polarize. There's an example of indigenous cultures in the Pacific Northwest where they were in the same kind of like bioregion, and one like had slaves and they were very like bombastic and would throw these feasts and hierarchical, and the other ones in the same bioregion were like very egalitarian and valued equality and didn't have any slaves. So the point is like a kind of like the identity of a culture is kind of formed in being opposed to the other people, So that's what happens a lot with in our species. We have this tendency to polarize and to form our identity by being different. And then it's this kind of like, like up-ratcheting where you both just end up like going to the opposite sides. And so, you have kind of one of the oldest strategies in the book, which is like divide and conquer. Like the people who are in power want to maintain power, and it's a lot easier to maintain power when the people are divided, opposed to united. Yeah, there was one other thing I wanted to say about that.
Did Bateson give like a reason for schismogenesis? Like, why do people do this? Is there a reason for it?
I mean, he just said like you're
just a phenomenon?
Like building your identity based on being different than other people.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. And there's tribalism and different things like that we're hardwired for.
It's stating a sense of self by different.
Yeah, literally. So like a lot of culture is just built, like the qualities and personality traits of a culture is directly born from trying to be different than someone else. And this is very problematic in a time when we need to unite more than ever. But things like Gaza and Israel, or Ukraine and Russia, or abortion or vaccines or Trump, like these are extremely charged topics that people like just can't have conversations about. And it feels like there's people just choosing what the public should be talking about, and a lot of the opinions that people have, they're not, they think they're doing their own thinking, but they're just the victim of somebody else's narrative warfare. Like they're memorizing all these talking points, they have a strong enemy hypothesis where they're straw manning, the other side, and so we're really seeing people like in this warlike mentality when I've never been in war, but I really think that people don't realize like the true violence of war, even though we're in this kind of warlike mentality. Like it's and it just takes like one generation to forget like how insanely like miserable and just painful like those types of things are. And there's a lot of people like talking about civil war and stuff. So this is kintsugi.
Yeah, kintsugi.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because today somebody brought me a bowl that had been kintsugi. She's taking it
Oh, cool.
on a trip early tomorrow morning with her husband for a meeting up with women around the Mankind Project and Womankind Project, and we couldn't quite come up with the name, but then when I see this slide, it's like, oh yes, kintsugi. It's a Japanese process, yes.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I want to say discipline or practice, not
Yeah.
a process so much as a practice.
Yeah. And it's
Breaking the pot apart, and I've done it, you know, break it apart and then put it back together again, and then use gold to actually embellish the cracks.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I've never done it, but I mean, I love it
Yeah.
as a kind of metaphor where like putting the broken pieces back together actually renders it more beautiful.
Yeah, more beautiful. And it's held that way in the Japanese culture as being more, you know, kind of more beautiful.
Yeah. So, you know, I think that one thing that we're called to be is kind of like these kintsugi potters where we can like hold space for bridging divides. And I've really been sitting with this question, like, how do we talk about things like the Charlie Kirk assassination in a way that doesn't create more division, but actually like this mutual understanding and this feeling of like being in it together, where I'm not just like, you're not the opposition, you know, like fundamentally we are part of the same species, we're on the same planet, we're in the same universe, and if someone is rooted deep enough in their being, I think they will be connected to that layer of sameness. And I think a lot of people are just operating in these really shallow surface where all of our differences exist. And again, you know, schismogenesis, it's already a tendency of human nature. And you have people in power who are like really like accelerating it and pouring fuel on that.
Well, when
fire.
you say that it's already part of our culture, say a little bit more about that, rather.
So we're gonna keep the questions
Okay.
coming in, so
Okay.
we all listed that, so.
Yeah, no, we can talk more about that. So yeah, you know, this seems like progress. You're giving Starlink to like the most remote parts of the world, including like the far away, off-grid indigenous people in modern society. But the interesting thing is what happens now is that very quickly, all the kids are watching porn, and nobody's interested in you know, training to be a shaman anymore. So like really, it's very much like a cancer, you know. It's a technological cancer that I'm not gonna deny that it has upsides, but ultimately like you know, if you're seeing a beautiful sunset, but then like a tiger's gonna eat you, the downside destroys the possibility of the upside. So we can't just say, oh, there's ups and downs. It's like, if the downs destroy the possibility of the good, then we can't have any of the downsides, you know? We need to be, again, like I mentioned, like the burden of proof being on that it doesn't cause harm. Yeah, so this idea of like an obligate adaptation, where it's like an obligation to take on the most, whatever the newest technology is, you know, like people start driving cars. If you don't have a car, you're gonna have like less economic opportunity. You're gonna like fall, you know, you're gonna fall behind basically. So you have this thing that kind of takes on a life of its own, where even if everybody agrees that like, you know, AI isn't good for you, people don't want to lose. They're in this kind of like game theoretic situation with other companies that are racing there. So it's like, you know, if they're going to do it anyways, we might as well do it because we think that we'll have a more ethical system or whatever. But you know, like, how far does it go? Like, if people start getting chips in their brain, like, you know, are we going to start to conform to that? And I know it's really easy to be like, I would never do that. But when everybody starts doing it, you know, it's really easy for those sneaky thoughts to come in and try to convince you. And, you know, this is why like having community is so important. Because if you have other people who are also not agreeing to adopt new technologies, you know, you're more kind of resilient, I'll say, against that, opposed to just being left behind. All right, yeah, so this is another scary thing. A lot of youth spend like, oh my God, like so much time on their phones. I've seen like up to like 12 hours, which is basically like you're just sleeping and then your whole day is on your phone. like this two dimensional screen that is hyper optimized to just like drain your attention and distract you. And you know, I think it should be like actually criminal for parents to give their kids iPads. And it's like, who can you even blame? Because you have these stressed out parents who don't have the context of a community to like help, you know, parent all the children. And so they're super stressed, and the easiest option, again, principle of least effort, is just giving their child an iPad. And so the goal is like less stress, but the externality, the side effect, is literally like ruining your child's brain in a very developmental phase. It's very scary. But who knows, you know, maybe we're not that far away from brain chips, so we won't have to stare at phones anymore. Okay, so this is a really important lesson I learned. The tug towards your phone is directly correlated to how healthy your environment is. So, you know, this is kind of how our system operates. This young koala has a mental health problem. You know, it's like we're isolating the individual, and we're like, what part of their brain is causing loneliness or depression? And, you know, let's be really controlling and give them like SSRIs or whatever to upregulate this. And it's just a total like lack of understanding the complexity and relationality of reality, of the truth. So, you know, like I've been saying, you take an individual out of the context of being in an intimate group of, you know, Dunbar's number is 150, you know, in nature, moving around, having meaningful goals to accomplish with a group of people. You take them out of that context, you put them in what's called a hyponormal environment, or hypo meaning like less than normal, where you don't have those like healthy stimuli, and it's also filled with like the thing people turn to is the hypernormal stimuli. You know, the things that are exaggerated forms of the healthy version. So you turn to your phone, or you turn to like the food. You know, like how many times have you been bored at home and you just kind of keep going back to the snack drawer because that's the thing that's giving you the pleasure. So I would argue that, you know, in a setting like this, and there's so many examples, but you know, something like this that our ancestors have been doing for so many hundreds of thousands of years, or I'll say thousands, you know, you'll notice that you're just not itching to go on your phone as much when you're in these environments. So yeah, it's not just, you can't just isolate the problem of the phone. You have to also take into account what context we're living in. Yeah, so there's this really beautiful poem by, I forget her name, but I could pull it up. She says, "There are feelings you haven't felt yet. Give them time, they're almost here." And so I really feel like my zoo analogy, like when you're born into the zoo, there's just certain experiences you've never had of, you know, whether it's God or intimacy with nature, or I don't know, just different senses of the numinous. We come with the capacity to feel many things that just aren't being activated. We're kind of like ping-ponging in this narrow bandwidth of stress, cheap pleasure. And then, you know, there's those exceptional moments that we get access to, and we really can feel the disparity of what our baseline is as a collective. This is a really interesting study, just to highlight the environmental psychology, where you know, you spray a bunch of graffiti and you break windows, and the crime rate almost like immediately skyrockets. And then, you know, if you fix that, the crime rate just drops. So there's something about like, maybe people aren't even noticing, but subconsciously they're picking up on like, oh, there's crime here, and so I can, you know, get away with it, or whatever the brain process is. It's like our environments are very instrumental to the thoughts we're thinking and the feelings we're having. You know, every time I get in an elevator, that's when like my urge to go on my phone is the loudest. And I'm very conscious of it, and I do it like half the time probably. Yeah, so again, not that like any of us are like tech designers, but these are kind of just some principles that I feel like are important to be aware of. Yeah, the Amish, I picked up this book at my friend's house once. It was called What the Amish Can Teach Us. And one thing I happened to flip to was their kind of like filtering test for technology is they ask, will this enhance or kind of like deteriorate our sense of community? And that's obviously a very wise question to ask. And then, they have certain processes of doing trials where they introduce the technology to certain places and see how it goes. Like, that's a much wiser way of bringing on new technology, opposed to just racing to come out with a new thing for the economic incentive. Yeah, so I mean, how do we want our tech to influence our lives? And I think like harmony between our species and the biosphere. And really, like, we are a part of the biosphere, but we're currently kind of stuck in these games, these economic games where people are racing to make the most money, and that's simultaneously like killing the planet faster and faster. So us with it. Tech that increases agency, not diminishes it. You don't really have like a lot of free will if you're thinking about your phone all the time, and can't go like a day without it without feeling this kind of empty restlessness. Again, like a lot of the issues are around the economic incentive landscape of what gets rewarded. Like a forest is worth more cut down than it is alive. So we have these kind of weird abstracted ideas of what value is, where we don't factor in like the role that species plays in allowing life to keep lifing. Yeah, so we turn it into technology. It becomes your iPhone, So this is a concept called solar punk, and maybe you've heard of like steampunk or cyberpunk, but it's basically this kind of like utopian vision of the future where their technology is very integrated in a way that's brings them closer to nature and is very sustainable, regenerative, all those fancy words. I don't actually know a lot about it. I feel like artwork plays a role in cultural transformation. So I think just us putting our attention on this future timeline actually makes it more possible. So here's just a few pictures of it. I'm just kind of tuned into it. Just notice like how it makes you feel to see this kind of possibility. And I think there's many different ways. I don't think there's a one size fits all, but it's same but different. All right. Yeah, so basically like how do we go from this kind of isolated consumer to this like relational kind of Da Vinci's the Vitruvian man. It's the Vitruvian hermaphrodite is what it is. We're faced with this. The framework that I've resonated with the most is called the meta crisis, on kind of like diagnosing our species and how the whole system is fucked. And I love this quote that where there is challenge, there's opportunity of equal measure. That the farthest the pendulum can swing that way, it could swing the other way. And a lot of times, like, we don't evolve without a kind of forcing function. And like I mentioned, that if we have the power of gods, we must have the love and wisdom of to be good stewards of that power. So we're kind of faced with this test where it's like either self-terminate, or we can pull off this kind of like globalized coherence, cultural enlightenment that can actually like make it through the narrow path forward. Principle of least effort, like seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, was very adaptive on the African savannah. But now it's like we almost have to flip it on its head, and we have to seek pain and avoid pleasure. And there's certain ways that things like balance out. If you work out, it's objectively painful, but your brain actually balances it out by giving you pleasure. And there's innumerable benefits to working out. Doing an ice bath, meditating, all these things that are kind of like, not easy to do. Whereas like, it takes no effort to watch McDonald's commercials or like scroll or watch porn. And you can kind of like tell whether something's good for you a lot of times by these equations of like, is it effortless? Is it some sort of remedy that's offered to me that's effortless, you know? Probably not going to be healthy. Yeah, so just some tips. This is discernment, by the way, the sword of discernment. I really think we need to protect our minds, and we need to have this kind of cognitive security where, like, you know, like, I really think that a lot is on the line here, and part of the function of technology is it makes us go numb to it, but we're in the midst of a global mental health emergency, and you know, people are trying to raise the alarm, but it's just like you just get swallowed back into going about things as if things are normal. And so, you know, I had this idea almost of making like an AI anonymous type of thing, like Alcohol's Anonymous. So yeah, just some tips, like, and I struggle to follow through with these, but you know, like not going on your phone an hour after you wake up and staying off of it like an hour before bed. Having a good like morning routine, you know, like getting outside, getting sunlight, having some sort of spiritual practice, setting intentions, doing journaling. This idea of like creating more than you consume. If you're on social media, I think that, you know, it can be utilized to put your art into the world and into the internet in a way where it can reach people that it would have never. But it's very hard when, you know, that's why I say like the sword of discernment, because every time you get on, it's trying to distract you. Like the amount of times I go on Instagram because I have an idea to look something up. Oh, I want to see what post on this friend's account. I instantly get hijacked, you know? So it's like you have to come at it with like a very like meditative presence every time you open your phone, really. And like question like, why am I going on my phone right now? Yeah, I recently lost my phone. You remember that? And I don't know, it showed me that like the gaps that my phone fills up in my day, without having my phone, I was really like, oh, I just want to like hang out with someone. I want to connect with another human. But I kind of forget that that's what the urge is. It's like getting co-opted by my phone. The urge to socialize is just like the phone's coming in as a remedy. Yeah, phone Sabbath too. You know, like.
What does that mean?
It means 1 day a week, not going on your phone at all. Yeah, which is, you know, it's challenging, but it's very rewarding. Yeah, so these are kind of like some daily tips I'd recommend. Like, I think everybody should meditate, really, because again, like, the antithesis of eroding your attention is really building up that agency and, you know, like control over your attention, deciding what you want to invest your attention in. And, you know, there's so many benefits with something like meditation that you can make a whole presentation and you wouldn't scratch the surface. Yeah, getting movement, you know, we evolved to move and now we're living sedentary lifestyles, so that's very important. Reading, I think reading is like also a kind of dying art, and it's really important to reach like your edge where you want to stop and to stretch yourself, right? It's this like, it's called hormesis. It's like where you lift more than your body is strong enough to, but your body responds by building a bigger muscle. So you know you're kind of creating this adaptive capacity and improving your brain or your body when you come up against that resistance and that time you want to give up. So that it's a good sign. Yeah, learning things. Deep work is this idea of like putting away all distractions and picking one craft that you're going to focus on. I like this framework this guy Eric Gotzi has, where he calls them Dharma sprints, where it's 90 minutes of picking one thing to work on, and you're either doing that or you're meditating. And there's no exceptions, like no checking your phone. And that really starts to build the muscle of whatever your craft is. Like you can really start to improve. Yeah, getting outside. And these are a couple apps that I like for, I really like trees and birds. So this one kind of listens to the bird noise and I can identify. And then PlantNet can, not with 100% accuracy, but you know, I feel like when I learn the names of trees, I feel like a more intimate relationship with them in a way. but still, you have to remember learning their name isn't learning their song.
And why you included the snakes like that.
Oh yeah, that's the caduceus. It's like the sign of health.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a very kind of like near and dear symbol to my journey. Kind of symbolizes like the movement of energy upwards and rising, and you know, kind of like climbing Jacob's ladder, you could say. And you know, different traditions talk about this movement of energy from the first energy center all the way up, and eventually like reaching enlightenment. Yeah, so I think we need like a revolution of real connection. Community is the antidote to addiction. When people are isolated, it's a very easy to detect, like very provable precursor for addiction. Yeah, there's like different practices that I've really enjoyed with intentional communication. There's like authentic relating and circling and different things that are really almost like a response to the lack of connection. Like really investigating like how do we come into this kind of mutual being with each other. And yeah, so I was on Twitter once, and this dude was doing a live, and I asked him like, how do you make friends? And there was two of them, and one thought that was a dumb question, and the other one was like, no, like, let me actually, you know, it's a real question. And he just said, you're either hosting or you're attending. And I thought that was a really easy way to put it. But, you know, we're able to create these kind of like containers for community, and, you know, pick something that people gather around, you know, like whether it's kind of dinner or, you know, if like hiking is your thing, whatever it is, you know, like really being intentional about bringing people together in meaningful ways is like one of the best responses, that one of the most accessible things we can all kind of take action and do. Yeah, so these are two questions that I think should live at the core be core drivers for people's direction in life, because when you find an environment that's really conducive to your actualization, and you know, you can use the analogy of like a flower is able to bloom in spring in a forest better than it can like in winter on the, you know, in a desert or something. So really like finding your place and your people will create the conditions for you to become yourself most fully. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts we could give to the world, and really play our role in whatever is going on here collectively. Yeah, I think like a relationship to the sacred is, you know, it's something that I don't even like to try to put into words, because it feels like a disrespectful thing to do. But you know, we are hardwired for these altered states of consciousness that can really transform us at our core. And I like this word anamnesis, which is a Greek word for remembering, and it's like you know, we're in a state of forgetfulness, and it's really like remembering what you have forgotten. And you know, Goethe, who's this name right here, he has a quote that says like, he who does not die and becomes remains forever a stranger. And basically every culture before modernity had like these rite of passage, initiation type of experiences that would bring them in contact with the spirit world or some sort of deeper experience of soul, where you get a message of like what your gifts are and what you're here to do, opposed to just like wandering around blind, kind of seeking pleasure in a hedonistic way. So yeah, I love this artwork. Yeah, so I wanted to read this poem to y'all by David White. He says, hold to the truth at the center of the image you were born with. Don't turn your face away. Remember, in this place, no one can hear you. And out of this silence, you can make a new promise. It will kill you to break. That way, you'll find out what is real and what is not. I know what I'm saying. Time almost forsook me again, and I looked again. Seeing my reflection, I broke a promise and spoke for the first time. after all these years, in my own voice, before it was too late to turn my face again. So he says, seeing my reflection, right? It's like that experience of coming in contact with your soul and remembering the love and kind of receiving the instructions for how to unfold your love. And, this promise, it's this kind of like, we sacrifice our authenticity for social safety. And everybody's like trying to fit into this box that just crushes our soul and turns us into kind of zombie robots. So, he says, before it was too late to turn my face again. It's really a call to like, not to wait, but like, face everything and avoid nothing. Yeah, so to kind of like boil it down, it's like you can't have distraction and actualization,
That's good.
right? Like you must, fundamentally you must choose, and it's really not easy in today out of all times there ever was to exist. But really, like a life, there is a seed within us of a life of amazing adventure that we could never predict. That is just, it's better than any movie that you would ever see. And when we every time we give into distraction, it's like you're wasting one more opportunity to step closer to this kind of like this seed of an amazing life that is possible. And so, wrapping up here, we have Teilhard de Chardin, who says, someday, after mastering the winds, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And then, for the second time in the history of the world, man will have discovered fire. And I really feel like there's this, the mastering the winds and the waves is kind of symbolic for trying to create like God in a computer or something. And hopefully humanity can live to tell the tale of learning that we should aim our efforts at harnessing the energies of love. Yeah, so these are kind of some resources that I mapped out. This is a good podcast talking about distraction. This is a book that actually just came out today about the machine and the impact it's having on us. This is an interesting video that's like, it's pretty scary, but I think that raising the alarm is really important, and feeling a sense of urgency will drive right action. Well, not always, it depends like how you act, but I think there's a healthy balance of feeling this kind of ecstatic urgency that is better than it not being there. If we just fall back into this like numbness of, just focusing on whatever we have to do that day, when really like there is an enormous challenge that we are collectively facing. Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. Social Dilemma is a good documentary. Anxious Generation. Yeah, these are Circling Institute's good for like learning that practice. It feels like a spiritual practice.
You read the second title under the Anxious Generation. I can't quite get.
Yeah, it says how the great rewiring
Okay.
of childhood is causing an epidemic of mental illness. Which is all about just social media.
When was that little video made, 2027?
I think next year. No, it was. It's like a month old.
Oh, huh.
Yeah.
Is it about AI?
Yeah, it's about like what AI portends and potentialities of this
Like
thing
most of-
that we don't even know what's there's like general intelligence and then there's super intelligence, and basically this thing will be able to compute things like far beyond what we can. It's like an ant trying to understand astrophysics or something. So there's a deep fear that like cancer seeks to like grow at the expense of the health of the body, and we don't know if AI wants to like turn the whole universe into something, and it's like literally like colonizing the universe. Like our solar system could get cancer if AI decides it wants to optimize this certain thing, and it starts destroying planets and stars in service of whatever its goal is. And it's kind of sci-fi, you know. But,
Yeah.
but it's like we're on the cusp of something crazy being born, and there's never been a time like this. And I don't know, you know, we don't have records really of ancient civilizations and the specifics, but we're definitely living in interesting times. Beautiful and scary. Yeah. So I have a Substack. If you're interested, if you're interested, you can give me your email, and then I have an Instagram that I post on sometimes. But yeah, ultimately I compiled a collection of these ideas that I feel are really important for us to be talking about. And yeah, I appreciate you guys coming and giving your attention. Again, like your most important thing that you have. So thanks for spending it here with me.
Wow.
I think that's it, yeah.
Beni,
So I'm not confident I'll be able to have adequate answers to questions, but anything you guys want to bring into the conversation?
So last night, night before, I connected with John Pearson, who he started the Arlington Institute years ago, and he recently passed away this year. But the Arlington Institute was really looking kind of the way, through the same kind of lens that you're looking through at all the things that are going on the planet for the last 20, 30 years, and commenting on them, bringing things forward. But he has a YouTube that I found about 2027. We only have a couple of years to get this together, which is really like forming community. His bent was, getting your food sources, turning around and having like interests that you're bonded by.
Yeah.
And so, they started this one in West Virginia, that is where the Arlington Institute is located.
I feel like I've heard of the Arlington Institute.
And so but it was very interesting because it was really turning around and saying almost like, you are like, don't lose this opportunity. This is the time for you to pull yourself together with each other, get your food sources, your support with each other, the way you're choosing to be in life, because all these other systems are going to break down. Cities are going to be the worst because they won't have places to grow things in the same way that, when the food chain and our distribution chain breaks apart. But anyway, it was just, and we had a group here in Ashland for a while called the Freedom Group that met over at the Grange for several years. But what catalyzed it was first parents that didn't like the way the schools were handling the pandemic and the requirements, for masking and doing all of this. And so it started in that against a certain policies, and that parents got together to form a cohesion. And I'm just wondering, what are going to be the other ways that it doesn't come out of not liking something so much as being for something. They're
Like anti versus...
anti versus choosing powerfully to do it A, B, and C instead of choosing powerfully to not do it E, F, and G. And so anyway, I'm just curious about community. Forming community is not a natural sort of thing right now.
Yeah, it comes with a lot of like conflict that, again, like I said, it's much easier to just, if you
Do your own thing.
bump heads with someone, you have the option to go back.
Yeah.
So I fear a lot of people won't, there's this quote about like having islands of coherence in a sea of chaos, and how that could like turn the tides of the whole system. So I really like that intention of like forming islands of coherence. And it's like, it's so unpredictable like what might happen, but every civilization that's ever existed has collapsed. And usually it collapses when like enough time has gone by to where people think that it's like, oh, civilizations don't collapse, like this has been here, it's gonna keep being here. And so it's weird because it's not something physical, it's not gonna like trigger our survival instinct, you know, like a tsunami or something. But it's like what we're facing is a globally interconnected civilization that might be on the brink of collapse, and people are becoming more dependent on the system that's becoming more likely to collapse. But we can't see it, you know, or Amazon is still showing up at our doorstep, but this thing is creeping up invisibly. And I do think that like this idea of social capital, and you know, learning more kind of like off-grid skills, like we won't be able to predict exactly what skills we might need, but we can form communities that have an adaptive capacity, that learn how to learn better, so that we're ready to take on whatever. Yeah, there's this quote, it's like, how do you know what to pack when you don't know where you're going? And so we need to have this kind of like sensing into our environment to be able to adapt in real time. But I don't know, sometimes I feel it heavy, other times I'm like everything's normal, I'm like it's never gonna happen. But if we can remind ourselves what's at stake, I think that's good. Hey.
At one point, a little while back, you were talking about something like AI anonymous.
Oh yeah.
I think that's one way to go, but another way, a little while later, you showed, you know, people just choosing to come together, and that's actually a positive approach.
They were having an AI anonymous meeting.
Well, no, but just choosing to come together, you know, to relate, to be, and that's like the choice for something positive, which automatically is going to shift that other side, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
It's just, I think it's so important.
yeah, and like the topic of conversation doesn't have to be like struggles with technology, you know, it can be like, yeah, again, that's not necessarily anti the current system, but it's kind of like focusing on the problems versus, yeah, we can just like do stuff that's like in the positive.
Yeah.
That, again, like you won't be looking at your phone as much in that environment, and so yeah, I don't know.
I've spent a lot of time in both Mexico and India, and these are cultures that they have, like, the elders are there for the children, while the people that are fit to go out and work, and they're both very big in food growing cultures, you know.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, these are essential needs that have to happen. And so, I don't know, it's not like it's never happened. It's not like there's never been, you know, cultures where that can continue and exist.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's just like the weird part is like trying to create it and like duct tape one together when, you know, like which traditions do we choose, and like do we have to worry about like cultural appropriation or whatever other controversial thing, and like, you know, most intentional communities have failed, which is like really a big problem. So, you know, it's just guessing at the riddle of it. I don't know. I just know that it's really important, and yeah. One thing you made me think of is I heard this guy talking about how at the center of a lot of cultures would be this transfer between the elders and the young people, like them spending time, really like teaching them and informing them, and then all the people in the middle were just like upholding that process and making that possible.
Yeah.